So-and-so just reported, this is a tweet, just reported White House staff are starting to look for jobs. Employers considering them should know there are consequences for hiring anyone who helped Trump attack American values. Find out how at the Trump Accountability Project. The Trump Accountability Project says, remember what they did. We must never forget those who furthered the Trump agenda. We should welcome in our fellow Americans with whom we differ politically, but those who took a paycheck from the Trump administration should not profit from their efforts to tear our democracy apart. The world should never forget those who, when faced with a decision, chose to put their money, their time, and their reputations behind separating children from their families, encouraging racism and anti-Semitism, and negligently causing the unnecessary loss of life and economic devastation from our country's failed response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I will give Trump no props at all for his response to COVID-19. It was the worst series of actions of his presidency. But the other things on this list are either false or extreme exaggerations, and that's not really the point here, though, is it?
Yeah.
The point is, can they hear themselves? Do they have any idea? And incidentally, I would recommend, so I've signed up with a throwaway email account to find out what they're up to as they start to be up to something, this Trump Accountability Project. But at the same time, before you respond, here we have Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, AOC, asking, is anyone archiving these Trump sycophants for when they try to downplay or deny their complicity in the future? I foresee decent possibility of many deleted tweets, writings, photos in the future. Okay.
With 329,000 likes.
Yeah. And just one more before we talk about this. Your brother, Eric, quote tweeted AOC in that tweet and said, you should Google Section A of the Reserve Index. Perhaps there should be a minimal history exam to let woke people into the left. You don't seem to understand the left, its history, or its objectives. You sound like the other team. You aren't the left. You're the other guys. This, of course, is something that he and you and I and many others have been saying throughout. No, our critique of this horrifying nonsense that is happening on the far left of the party is not evidence that we are on the right. It is evidence that we are actually of the left from when the left meant openness and inquiry and the ability to disagree with people without conflating that disagreement with a complete dismantling of them as human beings. So the Section A of the Reserve Index, apparently the Section A has been disappeared now through no nefarious means. The Reserve Index, actually I'll just pull it. Oh God, where did my thing go? The Reserve Index, just, you don't have to show this, Zach. This is just Wikipedia. It's, there's a lot here. Is, and I was going to read it, but now I can't find it. So the Reserve Index, as opposed to the Security Index. The Security Index is the list by the FBI of people that the FBI considers dangerous who might commit acts inimical to the national defense and public safety of the United States in time of emergency. The Reserve Index, on the other hand, again, I'm just quoting Wikipedia, listed all left-wingers and individuals suspected of being a communist. By the 1950s, for instance, there were 5,000 names under the Security Index, while the Reserve Index had 50,000 in the Chicago field office. Some of those people were Martin Luther King. And I feel like, I don't see it here now, but I feel like Robeson was on that. Paul Robeson.
Yep, that would make sense.
And it was Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, who put Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the Reserve Index in retaliation for, and again, I'm just quoting Wikipedia, his civil rights work and worldwide popularity.
Yep. So it will not surprise you. It sounds like you didn't see it, but I saw AOC's tweet also and could not restrain myself. I had to respond. Zach, will you put up my response to her? I said, you are an elected representative in a democratic republic, and you are setting the stage for retribution against fellow citizens for the crime of holding a different opinion. It's un-American. You should stop it and counsel others to do the same. And for anyone who doubts that I wrote that, I apparently misspelled counsel. There are two different ways
yes,
that
you
can spell it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. There's a a battle coming about this. First of all, this is a terrible instinct. This is an absolutely appalling instinct that you are going to hound the people leaving office and punish them for the very fact of being on the other side. And
I mean, not only does it forebode truly awful possibilities, but at a minimum, it reveals that they thrive on division.
oh, right.
That the extremists, really, on the left side of the Democratic Party, thrive on division, have no interest in reestablishing that we're all Americans and all human and that we are all in this together and should be seeking a better and more prosperous and more equal, but not equitable future. It puts the lie to all of that. They're not interested in that.
Yep. Now, I will say, Trump is far from innocent in this.
Oh, of course.
And his whole lock her up thing during the 2016 campaign was appalling for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
But at some level, we have to recognize that we as Americans have every interest in preventing this arms race, right?
Yes.
Where we treat the other side as criminals. And we start to recognize the mechanisms that allow this to be justified. So if you chase down what AOC goes on to say in her next tweet, it's about accountability. And there are these syllogisms that are used to protect this absolutely vile behavior, which have to do, you will hear, that there is freedom of speech, but there's no freedom from accountability, right? And on the one hand, that's true. On the other hand, it's what's implied, right? Accountability is one thing. Nobody is saying we shouldn't remember who supported whom. And frankly, you and I have advocated that one way to make the system more sensible is to get people who say crazy things to write it down, right? So that they can remember what they once thought. But that's very different than collecting information on people and then using it to adjust their ability to earn a living. The fact is, you have to leave room for honest disagreements. I would point out that the side that is now going around demonizing the Trump administration and, that term sycophants, that does not suggest that they're even talking about people who were formerly part of it.
Right.
They're talking about people who liked it. And
are they in fact talking about 70 million Trump voters?
Right. Are they in fact talking about something like that? And in a world where we are talking about all kinds of crazy stuff on the far left, right, about how to sort of informally restructure all of our interactions so that the right people end up benefiting. Right. This is just part of the parcel.
Are they talking about us, not Trump voters, but people who said with regard to his rule on, for instance, critical race theory, yeah, good one, keep that up.
Right. And in fact, we've seen the tech platforms who are effectively partnered with this ideology. We've seen them treat the unity movement the same way when the unity movement was decidedly not Trump, not Biden.
Yep.
Right. So, yes, the dangers here are many, and the echoes of history and the punitive nature of politics when you have a system that is less dynamic and less fairness oriented than ours are hard to miss.
Yes, it is.
So, the other thing I wanted to point out. So you've got you've got these little syllogisms about intent doesn't matter; it's consequences that matter, right? Now, I can defend that sentence, but I also know what it means in these cases, and what it means cannot be defended.
And there are also obviously places in, for instance, the legal system where intent does matter.
Well,
so the idea that intent doesn't matter has been used to advance the cause of critical race theory and, very illiberal practices in so-called diversity and inclusion trainings, where all it takes is for me to have taken offense to demonstrate that you were intending to give offense and that you have racism in your heart or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And no, sorry, that's not how that works.
Not only is it not how it works, but it basically empowers anyone who wants to, including bad actors who wish to abuse this power, to convict anyone they want by simply accusing them. So it is absolutely I would argue nothing matters more than intent, right? And that doesn't mean, so intent doesn't matter matches certain aspects of this, right? If somebody runs over, your kid, right? Your kid is gone. So in some sense, intent doesn't affect that parameter. And from the point of view of your grappling with the loss, it doesn't matter. From the point of view of what we do about the person who hit your kid, either through negligence or intent, it's all the difference in the world, as it must be, right? You get a crazy system if you erase these things. And so anyway, one has the sense that we are dealing either with people who don't give a crap about the system that they are destroying because they actually don't agree with us about the things that it is built to achieve, or that they don't understand it well enough to understand what they are unhooking.
Yeah, and either of those is terrifying. And there's also a crucial distinction between the analogy you just gave and what we're actually seeing, which is that in the case that your child gets killed by someone in a car, and you are forever after without your child, but the person driving the car will suffer different consequences regardless of whether or not they were negligent or intentionally trying to kill someone. The fact is that a dead child is an objective fact, and that a large number of the claims that are being made against people and against, for instance, those who worked or were somehow sycophants in the Trump administration are not objective facts. They are claims, some of which are actually, very few of which are actually falsifiable and falsified, and many of the rest are simply these sort of, but my feelings say I'm hurt right now and I'm offended, and therefore what you're doing is terrible. And so not only is intent being intentionally erased, but the actual conclusion, the thing for which they would erase intent, is very much a subjective matter, and they would make claims like asking for evidence of racism is itself evidence of racism, such that you can't even believe that the conclusion is what they say it is.
Yeah, that's quite right. And let's put it this way: there's a mixture. The reason that people would do this is a mixture of things. Some of them are confused, and some of them are actually involved in a massive power grab and putting the rest of us at tremendous risk that isn't theirs to create.
Yeah.
And the problem is, I keep running into this, which is, in order to protect ourselves from these kinds of instincts, right, one has to convey something subtle and increasingly, I think, boring. And so it's very hard to get people to focus on why we have counterintuitive protections, why we don't go after the other party when they leave office and we feel that what they've done in office is vile, right? Very hard to explain these things. And the idea that we need to get enough of us on board with remembering what those structures are for and how they work, when they work, and what has happened when they failed and why that's bad. I just can't imagine that conversation occurring broadly enough to reverse the trajectory. I did see, in a hopeful sign, there was enough traffic in the reverse, where AOC was trying to incite people to start cataloging who had committed these crimes.
Well, and as I began with, it's not just her. There's an actual page, and people are collecting.
Believe me, I've seen it all over. Hers
it's basically what was that spreadsheet that was started during early Me Too?
The bad men. It wasn't in Hollywood.
Called Bad Men. It was something men in Hollywood, the nasty men, whatever it was, where this journalist or would-be journalist, I don't remember what, basically said, just send me all of your names. Send me the name of anyone who has been naughty. And I how could I fact check it? So I'll just put that up there and then publicize this spreadsheet. And, of course it took out a number of good people, as well as, presumably revealing some truly heinous figures.
But the point is, an informal system like that invites abuse.
Of course it does.
I would also point out, long before Candace Owens was well known, she was involved in an effort to put together a basically, I hope I have this right, it was like a doxing site. So anyway, this theme keeps getting reinvented because
against the left, presumably.
It's a little murky as to what it was. I don't want to say because I'm not certain about the details of it, but it's a canonical where people will keep reinventing the idea of punishing those people on the other side. But I would point out, it is very rare these days that people on the left will invoke the comparison between Trump and Hitler. But there was a long period there where it was not the least bit rare to hear that assertion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the point is the idea that in an environment where you're going to get stuff that wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right, that you are then going to go about punishing people on the other side for disagreeing with you. That's preposterous.
Well, I gather you haven't heard that Rogan is the new Hitler.
That seems unlikely. I mean, you've met him. He doesn't really seem all that Hitler.
No, really not. But that would be exactly what he would do, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Luring us into a false sense of security by being so goddamn decent. That would cover it like nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So...
no, I've actually seen people beginning to suggest that Rogan might be Hitler.
I can personally assure you that he is not.
I know. I know. Of course not. But I mean, to the point that people, once you've established the need for the devil, and we talked about this when we were talking about Hoffer's book on mass movements, that this is akin to a religion. Every good religion, every successful religion needs some kind of a devil. That if Hitler, the guy he would manage to convince some number of people was Hitler, is now out of here, and like, who are you going to put up on the mantle of Hitlerness? Well, Rogan is apparently one of the.
Apparently on the list of candidates.
It's incredible. Right?
Yeah. It's really shocking that.
But you need a devil.